All right, welcome everybody to the Best Damn Fantasy Show. I decided to go ahead and put together a top 50 Dynasty Assets list. This is not my specific rankings. I didn't go through and rank these guys specifically myself. What I did was I took five different industry experts, basically, and I took their rankings and took their top 250. So they had to have a minimum of a top 250 Dynasty Assets list. And then I assigned points for each spot. So basically, the number one spot, if their top rated dynasty asset, I took and assigned that person 250 points. Their number 250 ranked dynasty asset got one. So you can kind of figure out how that worked in between there. And what I did then is took all five of those different rankings and then combine them to an average to see how that industry consensus top 250 would fall out, how that would shake out, and put together this list. I'm only going to share on here today the top 50 because I think those are the ones people are most interested in. I think anytime you are doing a startup draft or doing like a keeper league startup or anything like that, you kind of want to know where those rankings fall so that you can adjust according to your league settings and that type of thing. One of the things that I will kind of hit on as we go through this edition of the Best Damn Fantasy Show is that I think a lot of times industry experts and dynasty players in general tend to discount how much age matters, or excuse me, not discount, but overestimate it. Guys over 30 typically end up not getting as highly ranked. They get more of a ding than I think they should. I mean, if you have a guy that's 31, probably still going to produce for another 3, maybe 4 years, wouldn't you really love to have that person on your roster for the next 3 or 4 years? That's a top 5, top 10, top 5 player at his position, something like that. I think that sometimes we ding them too much for their age. If they're in their late 30s, obviously I understand, but probably not going to find too many guys that age in a top 50 list for dynasty assets anyway. Welcome, Jesse. Going to go ahead and dive right into this list here. Thank you for watching, Jesse. And this will be archived on the channel too. But I'm going to dive right in. We're going to do reverse order because why would we give number one right off the bat? And I'll kind of give my thoughts as we go through the list. Starting at the 41 through 50, I'll give these in 10 spot increments and kind of give a personal take on a little bit of this as we go through. So number 41 through 50, you have, let me adjust snafu there. All right, now we've got this laid out a little bit better. And please do follow us on our social media accounts. I'm going to have those streaming down at the bottom here. But at the 41 spot, you got Corbin Burns. Be interesting to see where he signs in the off season. 42, Freddie Freeman, probably heavily discounted because of his age. Can't say that I disagree, even though what I said at the beginning of the show. I still think that Freddie Freeman, on the other side of 35, that might be starting to get a little up there for dynasty rankings and that kind of thing. Zach Wheeler, George Kirby, Jackson Holiday. Obviously, he struggled a little bit coming up last year upon promotion. Not uncommon for prospects to struggle upon promotion their first time. So I wouldn't give up on him. It's nice to see him fall at number 45 in the dynasty rankings. Pete Alonso, Ozzie Albies, Dylan Cease, Garrett Cole, and Spencer Strider rounds out the top 50 dynasty asset rankings. Pete Alonso is somebody that I'm really interested in. He's still, he's not somebody that I would consider old by any means. And in the format that I am getting ready to do a startup draft, we only get a player for 4, maybe 5 years. 4 years most commonly, but you're allowed to have one player on your roster extended for a 5th year. So that's why I say 4 or 5 at max. So a lot of that time, Pete Alonso is still going to be very, very productive. So I think that in the format that I'm getting ready to draft, I would consider bumping up Pete Alonso in my rankings for this draft quite a bit, especially depending on where he signs. If he signs in Seattle, maybe you wouldn't put him as high just because of the ballpark. But say he signed with Boston or somebody like that. Not saying that Boston's in a running, but I just throwing a ballpark out there that if he were to sign with a team that has a park like that, then obviously it would increase his standing a little bit more. Last year put up a WRC plus of 131, so still going strong. His average was up a little bit last year, about 23 points on his batting average. But his power, his home run total came down a little bit. So maybe was he trying to make more contact or what was going on there? So interesting to see where he goes from here. But then moving right along now, we're going to go up into the 31 through 40 part of our rankings. We've got Ketel Marte, Logan Gilbert at 32, 33's Matt Olson, 34 O'Neal Cruz, 35 Jazz Chisholm, 36 Garrett Crochet, 37 Junior Caminero, 38 Roki Sasaki, 39 Riley Green, and number 40 Yoshinobu Yamamoto. My thing in this group, Jazz Chisholm is somebody that's really interesting to me. The reason I say that is I feel like he's he's been dinged up a lot throughout his early part of his career. But what I like about Jazz is I feel like he's one of those players. A lot of times when we see a guy sign in New York or something like that, we see a lot of people say things like, "Oh, the lights might be too bright for this guy." Or something like that. But I think that with Jazz, he's the type that actually kind of needs a big spotlight. I think that he will thrive in New York. I think it'll help him go even harder out there on the field. I think that he's going to be somebody that's really going to explode, and we might see him up in that 20s range this time next year. I think that Jazz is somebody that's really valuable in a fantasy league this year, especially because he's multi-positional eligible. Being able to play different positions, whether it's outfield, center field. If you have a league that specifies left, center, and right, the fact that Jazz Chisholm is going to be eligible this year in center field, that's a huge win. So I think that this is somebody that I will consider even higher up than 35 in my personal feelings toward a list like this. Only entering his age 27 season. I think we're about to see a huge breakout for Jazz, 30 plus home runs, 40 plus stolen bases type year. I really think that he's going to be somebody that could be valuable for a team. And then, of course, you see the NPB import coming in at number 38 with Roki Sasaki. I actually am very interested as a baseball fan to see how he does this coming year. I think that it's going to be very fun to watch him throughout the season and see his performance. However, having said that, I am very allergic to drafting pitchers. If my league just had hitters only, I think that would be just fine. I hate having to draft pitchers. You got to do it. But I am very allergic to them. I usually try to basically go bat heavy and just kind of get by on the pitching side. I play mostly points leagues. I'm not a categories guy at all. I think I'm in one, maybe two cats leagues. But points leagues to me reflect real life a little better than categories. And that's why I like points leagues. So I try to, go bat heavy, get a lot of points on my bats, and then just kind of get by on the pitching side. My worries with Roki is one, he's coming over here, and we've seen guys that were very productive in the NPB come over and not be successful. Dice K comes to mind a little bit. He was good over in MLB, but not as good as maybe he was hyped up to be. We've had some guys come over more recently and really, really, really impressed. But I'm always nervous whenever any kind of prospect goes up in competition. So we'll see how Roki does. The things that really bother me though is that there were reports of his fastball being down last year in the NPB. However, his overall numbers were still pretty good. It's just that they weren't as dominant as they maybe were in the past. His K per nine was down quite a bit, and his walk rate was up this year. So those are two things to kind of keep in mind. Maybe that was one of the reasons he really pressed to be posted was he didn't have to go through another season over there in Japan and maybe haven't even, slide again in 2025. Who knows? I think that this guy's still a very valuable person to select. But in a dynasty startup, you're talking the first few rounds, you're really building out the future of your team. And I get nervous whenever you start taking risks too high, too early in the draft. So let's move. Having said that, we'll move right along now into the 20s, 21 through 30 of the top 50 dynasty assets. If you're just now joining, the way I've got this put together is that I took 5 of the top industry website rankings and compiled those into a list, and then it spit out this top. Actually, I've got a top like 300 on my Excel spreadsheet here, but I only put together the top 50 for the show. I'm going to go ahead and move now into the 20s and the top 21 through 30 dynasty assets as of this offseason. Tariq Skubal, Bryce Harper, Rafael Devers, Jackson Merrill, Jaron Duran, Corey Seager, Austin Riley, Trey Turner, Michael Harris II, and Cole Reagans. That's how 21 through 30 shakes out. And in this group, I think that there's a lot of interesting names here. Trey Turner, 31, probably is getting dinged for his age a little bit. Like I said at the start, a lot of dynasty rankings, really give you a ding once you get on the other side of 30 for a dynasty startup. But my thing is, like in this league that we're getting ready to be drafting for on December the 26th, is that you only get a player for 4, maybe 5 years max anyway. So you might as well look for those guys that are going to be instantly productive for you to take advantage of that 45-year period. And anyways, even if you're in a keep forever dynasty, wouldn't you really like to have a good player that's going to be very good for 4 years? I mean, to me, that just seems logical instead of taking too many risks early on in your startup draft. Trey Turner has been very good. His WRC plus was up in 2024 over 2023. So he's showing no signs of really slowing down at the plate for me. And then Rafael Devers is another name in this group that I'm really looking at targeting in this draft. I mean, he's only entering his age 28 season. So if you have him for, 5 years, what's that put him 33 in the last year? So to me, that's a guy that's a no-brainer out of this group of 10. Like I said, kind of allergic to arms a lot of times in my startup drafts. So Skubal might have been heck of a dominant pitcher last year, but I still am looking at these bats and they always draw my attention first. Devers, put up a WRC plus of 134. And like I said, with the league format, only keeping a guy 4 years max, maybe 5 years if you use that extra year ability that you can use on one player. To me, Rafael Devers is somebody that you really got to look at in a format, any dynasty startup, but especially in the format that I'm getting ready to go into my draft. A couple other names that I'm interested in are Michael Harris II and Austin Riley. Austin Riley, I think, will bounce back this coming year. I think both of those guys are very valuable dynasty assets. Michael Harris II, specifically, as I mentioned earlier with Jazz, if you have a league that specifies left, center, right eligibility, the draft I'm getting ready to do does not specify that, but I know a lot of dynasty leagues do specify left, center, and right eligibility. If you can get a guy like Michael Harris II as your center fielder, that's huge because there's usually not a ton of very high offensive output type guys in center field eligibility. So to me, that if your league does that, that's something I would look at targeting. And then moving into now the teens. So we're going to have the 11 through 20 part of the list coming up now. You got at 11, Yordan Alvarez, 12, Jose Ramirez, Jackson Chourio, Julio Rodriguez, Vlad, Mookie Betts, Paul Skeens, James Wood, Wyatt Langford, and Francisco Lindor. To me, this is an awesomely interesting group. I mean, you got Paul Skeens like dominating people on the mound from the word go in Pittsburgh. You've got Julio out there, I think, is kind of like a lot of people are down on him because of his slow starts. But man, that dude is so talented. I would really love to acquire him in some leagues right now. But then given our league format that I mentioned earlier, I mean, you've got Jose Ramirez entering his age 32 season. And with any startup, wouldn't you love to have a dominant player for the next couple of years to start off your new dynasty league? I mean, having a guy like that to anchor your team for a couple of years is to me a no-brainer. People overthink the age thing, I think, when they're starting a dynasty and start drafting, double A guys and stuff like that before somebody like Jose Ramirez. To me is just crazy because I'd rather have somebody I know is going to produce from the word jump, from the word go. And last year you're talking about a dude that put out 6.5 WAR. His WRC plus increased from 24 to 23. So, in 23, he put up a 122, and in 24, a 141 WRC plus. So this is a guy that's not showing any signs of decline. I would love to have him on my fantasy team with those home runs and stolen bases and all that he's putting together. And then you got Wyatt Langford as another guy that I'm going to be heavily targeting. Kind of got off to a slow start in 2024 for the Rangers. But this is a dude that down the stretch really figured it out. After August 1st, he put up a 137 WRC plus from August 1st on. And even on the season, his WRC plus was still 110. So, I mean, he's still way above league average for an entire season. But the power was super evident those last 2 months of the season. He hit 10 home runs during that time and just 205 plate appearances. So, I mean, you're talking about every 20 times up to bat, whether he walked or whatever, plate appearances, every 20 times at plate appearances, he's getting a home run. That's a really good ratio. Sorry, I can't spit it out. Struggling a little bit with that. But anyway, you can get the idea. I mean, down the stretch, this dude his power was evident. This is a great dude to build your team around. I think he's really going to explode in 25 and be one of the top players in the entire league. And so now we've got the top 10 coming up. I think most of the names in the top 10 you won't be surprised by. But to me, I did see a surprise at the top. And that is that Bobby Witt Jr. was rated the number one dynasty asset by these 5 different sites. 3 of the 5 had him at number one. And that's how he edged out Shohei Ohtani, Ellie De La Cruz, Juan Soto, Gunnar Henderson, Ronald Acuna Jr., Kyle Tucker, Aaron Judge, Fernando Tatis, and Corbin Carroll rounds out the top 10. Corbin, he got off to a really slow start, but then really seemed to turn it around after the All-Star break. So no worries about him this year. I am kind of surprised Ellie is up there at number 3. I know he's a fascinating player to watch, an exciting guy to watch on the baseball field, but I would just have a very hard time drafting him ahead of Juan Soto in a dynasty startup. I can't get on board with that. And then you have at the top spot, Bobby Witt Jr., all around baseball player. He's going to outwar Shohei Ohtani. Last year he had a 10.4 WAR as opposed to Shohei's 9.1. But when you start thinking about it in your fantasy leagues, I mean, you really only care what they do at the plate. I mean, not very many leagues are scoring their defensive abilities. So Shohei's WAR is going to get a ding by being primarily a DH, and then hopefully he can pitch some this year. But then Bobby Witt's going to get a WAR bump from playing shortstop. So when you start looking at those two, to me, Shohei Ohtani is still the number one dynasty asset. So I have a real problem with that 1 and 2. And it'll be interesting to see how it plays out in fantasy drafts moving forward. To me, it was not even a thought that I'm drafting Shohei number 1 if I'm in the 1-1 spot for a dynasty startup. I mean, he's only entering his age 30 season, so it's not like he's super old or anything. If you have a guy like that for the next 4 years, I mean, that's a pretty damn valuable asset to have. Yeah, Witt's going to play longer, but realistically, you never know what's going to happen with your league and your situation, whether or not you're going to be able to continue in a league more than 4 or 5 years anyway. So if you could get Shohei Ohtani and get some of those pitching points and those points at the plate, to me, I think he's got to be number 1. So that's kind of where I would wrap that up. I'm glad that Ronald Acuna was still highly enough thought of to be, at the number 6 position in a dynasty draft, because I've seen a lot of people downgrading him in different Discord servers and that kind of thing. So be interesting to see how these drafts unfold, and we'll round out our top 10 kind of selections from our dynasty startup after that's over, so that people can see how that kind of shook out. But if you have any comments, who was your top player? What were your surprises in this list? Please feel free to let us know in the comments under the video. You can make a comment, and please do so. I'd love to hear your different takes on who should have been number 1, whether it's Witt or Ohtani. What do you think about Ellie being ranked over Juan Soto? That to me was a big shock. I just can't imagine taking Ellie over Juan Soto in a startup draft. To me, that would be a very difficult decision. So interested to see what everybody else thinks. Thank you guys for joining. And that's a wrap on this episode. Thank you.